With all of the website building tools out there, anyone can spin up a website these days. But unfortunately, most of these sites end up looking like, well, you did it yourself. I mean, look, you can go to the craft store and buy everything you need to decorate a cake, but let's face it, you're not likely going to be on the next great baker. Not to fear, when it comes to your website, I've got your back. In this video, I'm sharing my top design hacks to make your site look more professional. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Liquis Digital Marketing Podcast. Today, we are going over the 9 design hacks to make your site look more professional. Okay, so let's just jump right into this. So today, the tools available for you to develop and create and design your own website are there, right? Like you can go get a site put together, spun up rather quickly. But let's face it, if you've done it, you know that the sites that they show on the front end of like what you can do, they don't quite translate in real life, right? Like the site you built probably didn't meet the expectations you thought it would when you started the process. So let's go over these things that you can do to your website, whether you're building it now or whether you already build it. These are the things you can do to make your site more professional. Starting off at the top of a website is having a clean header with a clear navigation at the top of your website. Now, I know a lot of times people want to do something new and unique and do something that hasn't been done before. So they start moving their header around and changing the navigation of what is typical. And all of that is great. And maybe you've come up with some cool inspirational design. The problem is from a user standpoint, coming to your website, now I have to figure out what you've done. I have to figure out, okay, like your navigation's over here on the left and your logo's over here, and I gotta figure this out, and it's not typical, it's not normal. So I have a whole new user workflow that I gotta figure out before I can start consuming your website, right? It makes things more difficult for the user. So keep it typical, keep it normal. Put your header at the top, make it clear and concise, right? So have your logo in your header that is not too big, but not too small. A nice spacing around it, and then have your navigation up there. If you want, use the hamburger navigation where it cleans up the header where you don't have all of the different links at the top, where you have just the hamburger menu and it opens up. That's pretty typical, but it should be in the header, right? It should be normal. Your navigation, try to clean it up. Think about the user's flow. Use sub-navigation. Try to clean it up. The less, the better. Okay, so have a clean header and clear navigation at the top of your website. The next item is to create a hero section at the top of your homepage that clearly defines what you do, what problem you solve, and what action you want them to take. Now, most of the time, these hero sections or top header areas of a website are in your template or your design already. The problem is you have a welcome message in there. Welcome to, and then your logo. Nobody needs to see a welcome message. We don't need welcomed into your website. We see your logo. We don't need a welcome message. It just doesn't serve any valuable purpose. People are there to consume, to get something out of the website, some information, to learn more, to whatever. So you need to tell them in that top area what you do, what problem you solve, and what action you want them to take clearly. Don't get cute with it, just nice and clear of what you do, what problem you solve, and what action you want them to take. I say this so many times and it just doesn't go through, right? So that's why I keep repeating it. So take a look at your header. We'll call it the hero section. Does it answer those 3 things? The next item is to create contrast with your content. One of the biggest things I see is people will use these background images or background videos or even a background color to kind of, make their site look better. which is great, and I definitely recommend you do that. The problem is then the content, which is the really most important part of your website. It's not the image, it's the content. Doesn't have enough contrast, right? Like you can't read it. So it's like this white text over this kind of like busy image, and you just can't make out the text. The text is the important part. The design is there to enhance the text. So if you're using a background video or a background image, put like a screen over it or darken the image, whatever you got to do. Put something behind the text to make it to where that you can read the text. So, and that's throughout your site. So go audit your site and make sure that the text is very easily readable. I just developed a new word there. My advice next would be to define your color palette and your font styles. So the next thing people typically do when they build their own site is they just get really crazy with the different colors that they use, and you want to have a defined set of colors. And I really recommend having, just one or two kind of like colors. We'll call them pop colors, or your accent colors. So maybe it's the red, or maybe it's the bright blue. That should be like the action, right? So that should be used consistently through your site. But define a color palette, right? So if you have 3 different colors, define what those are and define which ones are going to be the most prominent, right? So I really recommend having 1 or maybe 2 prominent colors. The rest, more neutral colors, like a light gray or a white, or maybe a really light tan, something like that. When it comes to your fonts, pick 1 to 2 fonts that you're going to use through your site, and don't vary from that. You do not want multiple fonts and styles throughout your site. Try to pick a size of font that you use and use that consistently, which honestly, this next item brings us to the next item, which is keep things consistent. So as you make these color palettes, as you figure out what these font styles are going to be, figure out like the size of your fonts, make things consistent. If you have a call to action button that's orange, then make sure the call to action button is orange throughout the site. Don't have it blue in some areas and red in some areas and black in some areas. Make it orange. The only time I would steer away from that is if, let's say, you do have like text over a background image and orange just isn't going to work. You might just need to have white, right? So I get that. So under those circumstances, cool. But try to keep things consistent. Font sizes, font colors, font styles, the font family, the spacing between things. If you're going to start rounding corners, then round corners were throughout. If you have images, round the corners. If you have really rounded corners, then really round corners everywhere. If you have sharp edges, then keep sharp edges, right? Keep things consistent. Keep your header consistent. Don't have a different header from one page to the next. Keep things consistent as you can. It makes your site more cohesive and flows all together. All right, the next item is a big one, and that is properly using white space. This, hands down, is the number one thing people screw up when they design their own websites. I mean, this alone will take your site from good to great. If you ignored everything else I talk about in this podcast, do not ignore white space. In fact, I probably should do a podcast by itself just on white space. White space is the spacing around an item. The number one thing people want to do when they want something to have more focus is to make it bigger. All of that does is makes your site look busier. What you have to do is create space around it. It doesn't matter necessarily how big it is. What matters is how much space is around it. That, my friends, is the key. You want enough space around your elements to draw focus to them, but not so much space that the eye or the reader doesn't necessarily know where to go next, right? So you kind of want enough space to separate things, but not enough to where things then start to get lost, right? So go to your website and look at the space around your text, around your images, around the elements you want people to focus on. I guarantee you will be able to make changes, and you should make changes here, because I guarantee if you built your own website, you do not have properly spaced, white spaced. Guarantee it. So go take a look. If you want an example of a site that uses white space properly, go to Apple. Look at how spaced out they keep things in what they want you to focus on and the spacing around it. Perfect example. Okay, let's move on. The next item is to break your page up into consumable sections. So a lot of times when people are building out their websites, they have maybe a lot of text that they've written out. People are not reading your website. They're not reading your website. They're skimming your website. And what you want to do is just break things up into small little sections and make it consumable. Each section should have a title and some text and maybe some images or whatever, but you want to have a headline or a title that draws people in, talks about what this little section is about or what you're trying to say on your page, but break it up into consumable sections. Your site should be skimmable. People will skim, and then once they see what they want to learn more about, they will dive into that. So, consumable, small sections. Now, to bring your site up to the next level, a lot of these website builders come packed with the ability to add in animations. Now, these animations can be like intro animations or scroll animations. So, what we're talking about here is when a certain element loads into the viewpoint or into the screen, they might fade in or they might zoom in from the left or the right or bounce in or do something, right? So adding these in, now keep them consistent. If you don't do like, if you're going to do fades, then stick with fades. If you're going to do like zoom ins, then do zoom ins. So the interaction stays consistent. You don't want to overdo it, right? So it's nice to have some things flow in and do stuff, but you don't want to overdo it. And, you just want to like add a little interactivity, right? And that's going to draw attention. It's going to make your site look more professional. And most of the builders have the ability to just do that, to apply it to an element. Okay. And then obviously the more subtle the transition, the more, I don't know what the word maybe sophisticated would be, or higher end, more of a subtle fade or something versus a bounce in, is more kind of like playful and interactive. So, okay. The next item is use video backgrounds if you can. Like if you really want to take your site up to the next level, find a short little loopable video, no sound, right? This is going to be a background video. Something that doesn't have a lot of like colors, a lot of like different variations in it, right? Something that's not too busy, but something that has like, that also is about like the content about your site, and use that as a video background. A lot of these builders now have the ability to easily add in a background. Like you might have to purchase the video and then upload it. You might be able to like put it in, like put a YouTube link in there, whatever. They make it super easy to do, but use a background video. If you do that, make sure that you also usually have like a background overlay option. Make sure you turn that on and like put like an overlay over the video to darken it so the content on top of the video has that contrast like we talked earlier. But video backgrounds. One other thing to think about is if you're going to start adding video, be cautious to the page load size, right? Like when you start adding images and videos, it's going to affect the speed in which your site loads. So you got to make sure the video is small. You might have to use a caching plugin or something like that, but try to use background videos, and it really will elevate the overall look and feel and credibility of your website. All right, those are my tips and design hacks for making your site look more professional. Please go to your site, take a look at these items and see where you can improve. If you have questions on these, let me know. I'd love to answer them. If you found this valuable, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We'll see you in the next episode.